One of the coolest ways to take your microbit projects to the next level is to connect stuff to it. You can see along the bottom of the microbit here and on my screen, there are 22 little things to connect to called pins. There are 5 big ones and 17 smaller ones. Now, some of the things that you can connect to the microbit can be powered right off the microbit. Other things require more power, like a pump or a motor or things like that. We'll get to that. And you can buy these types of uh, breakout boards, they're called, which make these tiny, tiny little pins much larger and easier to connect to. But we'll come to this one in another project. One of the easiest ways to get started with controlling and powering something with the microbit is with LED lights. And here's an example of some really cool LED combined with paper and conductive materials, where you can kind of power these LEDs and even in some cases program and control them to flash or turn off, on, that kind of thing. And it's really easy to do. Now, you can buy individual LED lights. You can see one area, 2 little wires that go in that can complete the circuit of power to light it up. But what I really like as a starting place are these LED fairy lights. They have very low power, and you can connect them to your microbit to control them and power them. Okay, so we're going to demonstrate how to get started with some LED fairy lights here. So let's get started. Now, for this project, we're going to need our MakeCode editor at makecode.microbit.org. We're going to need our microbit. We're going to need 2 of these things called alligator clips. These are just wires that have nice little clips on them where you can put 2 different connections on the microbit, 2 different connections on your fairy lights. So, I mean, you can see that this fairy light, and I'll show you on my screen where I got this. You can buy them online. They're very cheap. This 10-pack was less than $20 and it arrived just in a couple of days. So less than $2 a piece. What's really nice about this is it's not going to shock anybody. The lights are not hot. As I mentioned, they're low energy, so it's a very good environmental solution for lighting. So all around, it's a great way to get started and very easy to program, okay? So one of the first things you're going to need to do when you get started with this kit is you're going to need to take a pair of scissors and you're going to need to cut this current power supply, which is 2 coin cell watch batteries, and a little switch. We're going to cut that off because we're going to make our own controller here on the microbit. And it's going to seem weird to cut off the power supply, but it's not hard to do. So basically what you're going to end up with is a fairy light. You can unwind it. It's nice and long. It's got lots of lights on it, for over 20 different lights on it. And you'll end up with 2 sort of ends of your wire that you can connect to your microbit. So I'm going to start by connecting my microbit to my computer for power. And then how this is going to work with a circuit, what you need, because a circuit, as you know, electricity has to run in a complete circuit, almost like a round circle, to get back to the power source. Think about it like a garden hose filled with water that reconnects to itself and keeps pushing the water around, okay? If we cut that or disconnect that water hose, the water just runs out and doesn't keep going around. So we have to keep our circuit fully connected. And to do that, we have the GND, which is called ground. Okay, this is going to close our circuit. So we're going to connect one of our alligator clips to that. Okay, now there is a constant power source on here called 3V that stands for 3 volts. That's not very much electricity. It's not going to shock you or hurt you in any way. That's important to know. So we're just going to connect the other alligator clip to the 3-volt. Now, it's very important that you never connect the 3-volt to the ground together because you're going to fry your microbit and it will stop working. So don't do that. But what we're going to do is we're going to clip this other end to the 3-volt. And then just to show you the other two ends of this thing, how it's going to work, we're going to connect the two ends of our fairy lights, and I'll try to get some of it in the camera here so you can see it. In fact, I'm going to turn off my little extra light here so you can see the LEDs light up a little more. And you're just going to connect it. It's going to work one way. And what I mean by that is when you connect these two wires, there isn't really any indication as to which one is positive or negative. In other words, which one you should connect to which wire. So we're just going to give it a try. You've got a 50-50 chance. So I've connected one to one wire, and as I connect the other one to the other wire, nothing happens. So it must be the other way around. So I'm just going to disconnect that. And I'll disconnect my other one. And let's just try it the other way. So I've connected that there. And there we have it. So we've connected it one of the two ways and it works. And notice that when I disconnect that circuit in any way, if I take off the ground or if I take off the 3-volt, the circuit is broken and the power stops running. So it's lighting these LED lights up fairly brightly. Now, the only issue with connecting it to the 3-volt pin is that we can't control the power in terms of it being able to turn it off or on or make it flash or anything like that. And that's what we want to try to do through the coding editor in MakeCode. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect it to one of these other 3 pins, any one of these others. I'll connect it to the P0 pin, but what you'll see later on, when you light it up, what I want you to notice is that the amount of power that comes off the P0 pin is much less than 3 volts because these lights are not going to light up nearly as brightly. However, what you will get is the ability to control it, okay? So I'm going to disconnect this for now. It'll eventually go to the P0 pin. But what I'm going to do is move over to my MakeCode editor and open up a new project. And why don't we call it LED lights or anything like that. So we're going to use some new coding blocks that we haven't used before. So what we're going to do is have an input of pressing one of the 2 buttons, and then we're going to turn on some power to this P0 pin, okay? So what we're going to do is start with the input. We could make it go forever, but I think what's nice to be able to show you're able to control it is that being able to push some buttons to turn it on or off. So why don't we drag out this from the input? Let's drag out the on button A pressed. And what we're going to do now is we're going to have to go down to the advanced area. Pretty cool, hey? And down there we see red, we see pins. So let's open up the pins category of blocks. And what we're going to do is we're going to digitally write this one of these pins. Now, I'll explain what that means. So we're going to put that inside here on button press. So how this works is there are two states of this pin, off and on, represented by 0 and 1, okay? 0 and 1. So 0 means power is off, 1 means power is on. So what we want is when button A is pressed, we want to turn it on. Now, do we want to turn this off with one of the pins or some other movement? Yeah. So why don't let's see if you can figure out how to use the button B pin to press to turn this pin off. All right, I can imagine some of your brains working away, but here's how we make that work. We use this same button here, on button, but instead of A press, we're going to change it to B. And on B press, we're going to use this same pin here. Why don't I just right click and duplicate? Now, instead of digital right pin P0 to 1, 1 was on. Do you remember what it is to turn it off? Right, we click in there and we change the value to 0 to turn off. Okay, now let's see if that works. Okay, we're going to download this. First of all, we have to connect to our microbit. So don't forget those steps. And we're going to go next. And we're going to connect our microbit. Aha, there it is. And we're going to connect. Oh, right, we are connected to the microbit. Great. So let's download our program. All right, so we're going to go back to our microbit. We're making sure it's plugged in. Now we have to connect. We're controlling it from the P0 pin. So we have to take our one alligator clip and connect it to the P0 pin. The other end connects to that ground, remember, to complete the circuit. We've got our LED lights here. And let's see what happens when we push the A button. There it is, it turns on. A lot more dim than when we connected to the 3-volt, right? So it's on and we push B and now it's off. A turns it on, B turns it off. So now you've got a whole bunch of neat possibilities for controlling LED lights. So think about this. How could we now take this program to the next level? Would we want to make the lights flash for a little bit? How might we do that? Okay. Well, one way we could do that is we could turn it on and then wait for a little bit and then turn it off. Okay. So in the basic blocks, there is a pause feature, a pause button. Now 100 milliseconds is 1/10 of 1 second, so that's not very much. So we could make it go 1 second, and then if we duplicate that pin, so we could turn it on for 1 second and then turn it off. Okay, now let's download that, see what happens. All right, we've hit the download button, so let's see what happens to our lights. It turns on for 1 second, then it turns off. Not bad, hey? Push it again. All right, we did that. We controlled it. We turned it on, it waited a second, then it turned off. So how could we take that to the next level? Well, what if we want that to keep repeating? Well, we could just put it in a forever loop such that the moment it's connected, it always flashes forever and ever. But what we could do is also set it for a certain number of times to flash. Okay. Now to do that, we're going to need a loop button. All right. So we're going to go into the loop blocks and we're going to, repeat X certain number of times. It says 4. So we can change that number. I hope you notice. So what do we want to do 4 times? Well, we want to do all of these things here, right? We want to digitally write it. We want to turn it on, wait a second, turn it off, and then we want to repeat that. But actually, so I'm going to repeat that 4 times and just put it back inside here. So does this make sense? Just take a look at this for a second. So we've got on button A pressed, get that out of the way. It's going to repeat this whole thing inside here 4 times. Turn it on, wait a second, turn it off. So one thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to also make it, after I turn it off, Like if it goes off and then immediately back on, we're not even really see a lot of flash. So I'm going to duplicate this pause. So just take a look at that, okay? We're going to turn it on, wait a second, turn it off, wait a second. In fact, maybe 1 second is even too much. Why don't we go half a second? So 500 milliseconds. All right, let's download that and see what happens. All right, it says it's downloaded. So let's push our A button and see what happens. Wow. Did you see that? Let's watch it again. And let's see if it was what we expected. Push the A. 3, 4. Yeah, repeated 4 times. Now, could you make it strobe and flash faster? How would you do that? What would you change in your program? Could you change the number of times? Would you want something else to happen? Would you want anything to show on the screen? Would you want it to make a sound of any kind? There are lots of extra things you can add on. So that's getting started with these LED fairy lights. The other things to think about now as you progress in some of your projects, if you wanted to do some of these projects with involving paper or cardboard to make something light up that is controlled by the microbit, some things to think about now are getting power to the microbit. So you're probably going to need your battery pack for this one. And be careful with the battery pack. And the reason why is at the bottom of your battery pack, you can see a little notch along the top that this is going to fit into up here. It only fits one direction. So make sure to fit it the proper direction when you have your batteries in here, okay? So if you kind of want to disconnect from a computer to power it, you're going to need your battery pack. The other thing to consider is, where is this microbit going to be with your creation? Is it going to be behind? Is it going to be hidden in some way? Is it going to be visible in some way? And that's something also to think about. And what kind of housing or thing can you build around your microbit to protect it, but to give you enough access? Like if you're using the A button or the B button, do you need to see the screen? So these are the kind of things you can start to think about as you start to design your inventions that involve these LED fairy lights. So I hope you enjoyed this. It's really easy to get started. Again, don't be too frustrated. Sometimes these things don't connect perfectly. So just kind of wiggle around these wires if it's not connecting perfectly. And remember, if your lights are not lighting up, you can always just try to switch the connection from one to the other, switch them around. And yeah, you can start off with that 3 volt as I did, just to make sure your lights work, and then use any one of your other pins to kind of make it go. Hope you enjoyed it.